internationalist, garbage as they can to get very down in the gutter with you. And now we wake up and you say, well, it's only, business as usual. The Republicans were crooks. They were. They were terrible crooks. They were evil. They were evil. They were some of the most evil doers I've ever seen in my life. They even went to war and kept the war going, crippling and killing American men, crippling and killing American men, only to make profit off the war machine. They were war profiteers of the worst kind. They were warmongers and war profiteers of the worst kind. That is why they would not win the war in Iraq, because they didn't want to win the war. They figured, 30 men a month losing their eyes, 30 men a day losing their feet, doesn't matter. As long as the money goes into Goldman Sachs, as long as the money goes into those who put him in office, they were the worst of the worst. So look what we have now. You thought it couldn't get any worse than Bush? Wake up, my friends. It just got worse than Bush. In about 5 minutes or so, Scott Rasmussen on the Savage Nation with the news you will not read nor hear anywhere else, right here on the Savage Nation.
Savage. The Savage Nation.
He's got a lot of passion.
He's funny.
Really right on top of things.
Talk 910 KNEW.
Okay, welcome back to Savage Nation. We've been talking about Obama holding a fire sale of America's nuclear defenses in Moscow, but prior to this discussion and us discovering that this was going on, the Rasmussen poll came out showing that by their facts and their excellent polling, Obama's approval index rating has actually gone into a -5. Many of you are bad at statistics, but I don't think this is too hard to follow. Mr. Rasmussen, please welcome to the Savage Nation. You're on the program. Tell the people how you do your polling. Hello, Scott.
I'm here.
Hi, how do you do your polling?
We do an automated telephone poll, and we call thousands of people every night. We make sure we reach people all across the country in different types of settings, different demographics, and we make sure that the sample we end up with reflects the nation at large.
All right, so it's not based upon voters only? Is it based upon the population at large or voters only?
Well, it depends on the poll that we're doing. When we poll on business topics, we do consumer and investor confidence every night. That's on all adults. When we do our political polling, especially with the approval index for the president, that is based on a group of sample of likely voters.
All right. Your latest rating, your index rating of 70809, shows an approval of 32%. Is that not rather low for a president so early in his career?
These numbers are the number who strongly approve and who strongly disapprove in our index rating. So 32% strongly approve. Another 20% out there say they somewhat approve. And what that means, if you add it all together, it's 52%, which is just about the same total, the same number of people who voted for the president last November. The honeymoon is coming to an end. He's no longer enjoying the great ratings he had back in January, February. And a year from today, his numbers will depend on where the economy goes from here.
That's an interesting point that I wanted to ask you about. In your internal look at the polls, what do you think is the single biggest factor or the three biggest factors that are keeping him from having a higher approval? Or conversely, why is his disapproval stuck at 48%? General Motors, you mentioned, is one of the issues?
When the president first ran into trouble was during the first stimulus debate when the House Republicans voted unanimously against it. Republicans began to rally at that time, and their disapproval of the president went up. The General Motors takeover is problematic. The American people do not like it. In fact, GM owners are skeptical. Only 42% of GM owners say they're likely to buy another GM car. There are concerns about the quality, and there are just concerns about the process of government ownership. And then most recently, those numbers had been heading downwards a little bit at a time. Last week's jobs report pushed the president down a little bit further in his ratings, also pushed consumer confidence down to the lowest level in 2 months, and pushed investor confidence down to the lowest level in 3 months. What it did, it changed the storyline from the economy was bad when Barack Obama took office, but generally the signs are getting better, to saying, oh my gosh, this is not what we expected, and the economy is not doing better, and people are now skeptical about the stimulus. They're skeptical about many of the programs that are being proposed that involve more government spending.
This is interesting. So it always comes down to the issues of bread and butter to the voter. Those are the biggest issues in a time of relative peace. So we don't see any loss of popularity based upon national security issues, the issue of where he was born, any of those other things. It's all based on the economy and dollars and cents?
At this point in time, that is true. There are cycles that these numbers go through. You know, when President Bush ran for re-election, the driving issue was the situation in Iraq and the broader war on terror. And when those numbers moved, the president's numbers moved. But right now, at this point in the Obama administration, to quote James Carville, it's the economy, stupid. I mean, that is what is driving it. All of the rest of the numbers. The people who are upset about where the president was born, you know what? They were never going to support him to begin with in terms of these approval polls. The people who have national security concerns generally disapproved of this president beforehand. If you look at the people that still say it's the top issue, very low support. Where the president had enjoyed very strong support were among people who said the economy was the top issue, and that's where they're starting to have some doubts.
All right, Scott Rasmussen, his new poll shows a -5. That's the approval versus disapproval. But you're saying that really hasn't moved from when he took power, or has it?
No. It's down to when he first took office. His strong approval numbers were in the mid-40s, and hardly anybody disapproved. Those numbers have moved dramatically since January, and in fact have moved dramatically over the last week in response to this jobs.
All right, so strongly approved 32, strongly disapproved 37. That's a -5. Back in January of 2009, it was strongly approved 44, strongly disapproved 16. So it was a real plus there. It was like a 28, a plus 28. It's now a -5.
Right, and that's a huge swing.
Okay, now that leads us to the next question. Relative to the last president, Bush, in his 2000 period, or would it be 2001? I can't even remember anymore. Let's say his first 5 months. Would you say it was the same?
Entirely different dynamics, but the numbers were moving to about the same point. If you recall, President Bush, in that first time he was elected, it was a disputed election. He wasn't even named president-elect until several months had gone by.
Yes.
And what we ended up seeing was George Bush's approval numbers went up to about the level where Barack Obama's are now, whereas Barack Obama has been sliding down because he started with a larger majority. On September 11th, 2001, the world that we knew changed, and George Bush's numbers changed dramatically, went sky high for a period of time, really unlike anything we've seen from a normal presidential approval.
Well, this is interesting. From what I'm learning from this is that at the end of the day, it's all dollars and cents and bread and butter issues.
Yeah, there's people want to compare presidents. They want to compare policies. President Reagan got a huge boost. He had one of the biggest increases in his approval in his first 100 days, but that's because he survived an assassination attempt and did it with good grace and humor, and people loved him. You can't make these comparisons because events are different. Yeah. And there's almost always a single issue that is driving the public concern, and most of the time, 2004 was an exception, most of the time, it is the bread and butter issues. It is and by the way, it's even closer to home than that. When we poll on perceptions of the economy, on the nation's economy, the biggest decisive factor for most Americans is what they see around them at their workplace. If their company is laying people off, they have a very negative view of the overall economy. If their company is hiring, they have a much more positive view.
So the bottom line, the take-home line for someone driving around in a car right now, somewhere in America listening to this show, is that Obama's negatives have gone way up, his approvals have gone down, and it's continuing to change on us, and it's all related to the economy, basically.
That's right, and if you're looking ahead, here in New Jersey where I live, we have a governor's race this fall. If the president's numbers continue to sink, it will have some political impact on Governor Corzine's bid for re-election. He is trailing right now, but looking to 2010, people want to know what the president's numbers are going to be like. And the answer is, tell me what the economy is doing, and I'll tell you what his numbers look like. If GM is hiring people and paying taxpayers back and the economy is humming along, you know what? his number, the president's numbers will be great. Democrats will have a good year.
Mm-hmm.
If GM is asking for more bailout money and there are more economic problems and unemployment is still high, the president's numbers will be down and Democrats will be in a very difficult environment for the 2010 elections.
Well, all my life I've said, what are polls? What do they know? But, I have a doctorate in epidemiology, so I know statistics can be very accurate if they're done accurately and they're done scientifically. Now, you started a company, Mr. Rasmussen, that is independent. You've never been a campaign pollster. You've never consulted for candidates. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And yet what's interesting to me is that the minute you're going to show a poll like this, the Obama lovers are going to say that you're a right-winger. That's what's going to happen tomorrow.
Well, that's all right. You should see the hate mail I got from the Keynes people in the election season when I kept saying Barack Obama was up by 6 points.
I see.
One of the things you learn in this business is